Transformers had 10 individual video game releases on the Nintendo DS throughout its lifespan, so I thought, how does the 3DS compare? Now, I'm not gonna lie guys, there's only 3 games.
3 or 4 times, maybe.
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
Thankfully, on the 3DS, they decided not to split any of these games into an Autobots or Decepticons version, probably because they could fit more on the 3DS cartridges than they could on the DS, which is just great. Now, before we go any further, if you enjoy tie-in games, nostalgia, DS videos, this is the channel for you, so please hit that subscribe button, tap the bell for notifications, and continue on with this Transformers 3DS video. Okay, so for our first of these 3 games, we have Transformers Dark of the Moon Stealth Force Edition. And with a name like Stealth Force Edition, you think, wow, this game's gotta be good, right? No, it's really not good at all. So the Stealth Force Edition was exclusive to the 3DS and the Nintendo Wii. It differs from every other version of the game. While it's still a prequel like the other console versions, it's just nowhere near as good. And I mean, the other versions aren't even good anyway, so they've taken a really mid game and made it even worse. The game has a campaign that alternates between Autobots and Decepticons, finally doing away with the whole Autobots version and Decepticons version, which is just great, but also bad for Activision because it means less money. The game's events lead up to the reactivation of Shockwave, who is obviously a major villain in the film. Now, this all sounds quite cool on paper, but what this game essentially is just a big marketing push for toys. Now, yes, I know you could make that argument about a lot of Transformers, but it's very obnoxious here. In the Dark of the Moon film, Bumblebee is shown to have a weaponized vehicle mode that they call Stealth Force, and of course this led to a long line of toys that could do the same thing. And this game is entirely built around that Stealth Force mode. So yes, that's right, this is a Transformers game where you can't actually transform into the robot, you are in car mode or slightly more aggressive car mode, and that's it. But how do these car modes handle, I hear you ask? Well, the answer to that is like shit. Driving on the DS versions were hard because you had the D-pad, but yet they've somehow managed to make it even worse when you have the circle pad that actually can move in many different directions. Very strange. Handling just is awful, turning is just gross. It's all just really, really, really janky, and for an early 3DS game, it looks terrible as well. Like, I know the system wasn't that impressive in terms of graphics, but the game just looks so ugly. Controlling the cars in stealth mode is a little bit better because you only use the L and R buttons to turn this time, and you strafe using the circle pad, so there's a bit more maneuverability around with that, but at the expense of aiming, because aiming in this game is just kind of... It auto locks on, but it's very, very fiddly to get it to stay locked on. I had a lot of difficulties playing and overall just did not have a good time. One thing I will say that is good about this game, again, it has all the voice actors of the Transformers, so Peter Cullen is back as Optimus Prime. There's some kind of stylish cutscenes that don't look too bad compared to the rest of the game, but genuinely, that's about as nice as I can get when speaking about Transformers Dark of the Moon Stealth Force Edition. I can only imagine this was even more horrendous on the Nintendo Wii, and maybe we'll look at that another day, but I'm all Dark of the Mooned out for now. Out of all the versions of the Dark of the Moon games, the 3DS version scored by far the lowest, with 30 out of 100, which is just abysmal. I think that's one of the lowest scores we've had looking at any game on the channel. The highest for Dark of the Moon was 59, but the lowest being 30 is just absolutely pathetic. I don't know what the hell they were thinking with this one. Okay, so if you've made it this far in the video, please comment,
I am Optimus Prime,
down below. Okay, so next up we have Transformers Prime the game, which we did cover in my Transformers DS video, however it's had a bit of an upgrade for the 3DS. If you don't know what this game is, it's based off the Transformers Prime series that ran in the early 2010s. The theme song is Majestic. Anyway, this game follows the Autobots and their human companions stopping the Decepticons who are trying to free an ancient and powerful Transformer known as Thunderwing, which is just a ridiculous name. One of my biggest complaints with the DS version of this game was the storytelling. It mixed in cutscenes that were from the show with just random PowerPoint slides that told integral parts of the plot, and it was just really jarring to change between the two. Thankfully, that is not the case with the 3DS version. All the cutscenes are done in-game with the in-game models, and while they don't look amazing, it's nice that everything is moving about. It feels a bit more alive and a bit more believable compared to just some slideshow garbage. Now, this version of the game was developed by Now Production, whereas the DS one was by Ultron, and you can tell that this game was meant for the 3DS. The levels are bigger, the boss fights are bigger compared to the DS versions, and some of the platforming is more complex. And when I say complex, I don't mean actually challenging to the player, I just mean there's more going on compared to the DS version, which could not handle the game at all. Unlike the Stealth Force edition of Dark of the Moon, the driving in this game actually feels alright. There's nothing particularly janky, it's not hard to control. It's actually pretty fun, to be honest with you. For a 3DS game as well, the backgrounds and settings actually look pretty good. Sometimes the Transformers and human characters also look good, but sometimes they also really don't as well. It's really weird. Sometimes their textures are just absolutely gross and very unclear, and then in other times they look really good. It's very strange, very jarring. In terms of combat, this game basically just plays the same as every other Transformers game on DS or 3DS. Lock on with your left bumper, shoot, and brawl. That's kind of it. But at least this Transformers game actually allows you to transform, which you can't really say about the previous game. Another great thing about all the versions of this game is that nearly all of the voice cast from the show reprise their roles in the game, literally except Dreadwing. That's kind of it. Now, if you are a fan of Transformers, there are better Transformers DS games out there. Certainly not the previous one we've looked at, but definitely some of the earlier ones on the previous platform. However, if you're a big Transformers Prime fan, you should definitely check this version of the game specifically out. It runs well, it plays well, it looks pretty nice for the most part. The only downside is it's not very long. You can definitely complete the entire game in like 3 or 4 hours tops. But if you're looking for a Transformers game on the 3DS specifically, you've got to pick this one up. In terms of Metacritic scores for all versions of this game, the 3DS one was the highest version by far, with a nice 72 out of 100, which is a pretty good score. The lowest is a 56 on the Wii U, and the DS only has one critic review, so it technically doesn't have a score, but that one review was a 56 out of 100, so we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so for our third and final Transformers video game on the 3DS, we have Transformers Rise of the Darkspark. Now, this is the one modern Transformers game that I genuinely knew nothing about going into, and I am very confused now I've actually played some of it. So before I even talk about the 3DS version of this game, apparently this is a spin-off and crossover between the War for Cybertron series and the live-action Transformers films? Huh? It's been described as the third and final entry in the Cybertron series, even though this game was not developed by High Moon Studios, nor was its handheld counterpart developed by Vicarious Visions, so I don't really know what happened with this one. So the developer of the main console and PC version is Edge of Reality, but for this version specifically on the 3DS, we're looking at WayForward Technologies. So, much like its console counterparts, half of this game takes place in a timeline divergent from the one where the films take place. So this is basically an alternative to the events of Age of Extinction, that Mark Wahlberg film with the robot dinosaurs, and then the other half is the Decepticons in between the War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron. Oh, I don't even know anymore. If you're following what I'm saying, congratulations, I'm confusing myself as I'm speaking. Anyway, so on consoles, of course, this was an action/shooter game, but for some bizarre reason, the Rise of the Darkspark on the 3DS is a strategy turn-based RPG. What? I wish I'd recorded my face when I opened this game up, because I was so confused when I got into the game to see these little pixel versions of Transformers that you move about the map. Now, I've played a lot of strategy RPGs and turn-based RPGs in my time, and let me tell you, this is not one to check out if you're a fan of that genre. It's a cool concept putting Transformers in this genre, but it's so undercooked that it's just not even worth the time. There's so many more complex and more interesting RPGs out there. And I'm sure had this been given to a developer that actually cared about the property and wanted to make this game properly, it would have been done well, but obviously this is a tie-in game, really. Like, I know it's also in the War for Cybertron series, but realistically, this is just another movie tie-in game. So movement is essentially tap on the transformer you want to move it to the point on the map where you want to move it to, and then if you can perform an action like press a button or attack another transformer, press that. That's all there really is to it. You can't transform yourself. They do transform when they move, of course, but again, this is another Transformers game where transforming isn't really integral to the plot whatsoever. Combat-wise, this is one of the most boring turn-based RPGs ever. Like, it's really mind-numbing, to be honest with you. It transitions from this very nice pixel artwork to this jarring Michael Bay-era CGI Transformers fighting. I don't know, they should have just gone with one look or the other, not both. It doesn't work with both. The 3D Transformers models don't look terrible, there's just something very uncanny about them, a bit creepy and eerie, I'm not really sure. To be honest, a lot of their designs in the Age of Extinction film were just a bit weird as well, so it kind of transitions into this game well if that's what they were going for. Honestly guys, I'm so disappointed to learn that this is in the Cybertron video game series. Like, the first two games are so good, how could they possibly end it on such a pathetic whimper? I certainly couldn't recommend the main console versions at all, but I guess if you are a fan of this genre and Transformers, I could see how this could be appealing to you. It's not bad by any sense of the imagination, it functions, it's just very boring. Now, in terms of critical response, every version on console or PC scored somewhere between 38 and 49, which is just pathetic. But the 3DS version has a separate entry, and although it doesn't have enough reviews to give it an official score, if we take the average of the 3 review scores, it would give it a 60 out of 100, which would just put it in the average zone, which I think is about right. It's not a great game, it's fairly well made, parts of it are kind of entertaining. I like the genre change-up they've gone for, it just needed a bit more depth and a bit more care put into it. Anyway, that is all 3 of the Transformers 3DS video games. Now, these are definitely a very mixed bag of games. You're definitely better off sticking with some of the DS releases because most of these aren't that good, if we're being entirely honest. There is some fun to be had, but you could definitely find better games with Optimus Prime in it. So all I have left to say is thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications of all my future uploads. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Thing like this. Let them come.